Hello everybody, welcome along to this video, which is Mr. Johnson Teaches Paper 2, Section A, Question 4. This is part of the English Language Revision series of videos I've put together in this playlist, which talk you through all of the different questions that you will encounter on your English language, and hopefully provide you with some strategies and approaches that you can then take into any assessments that you are doing. As it says at the bottom, you will need to be ready to pause this video to make some notes. Don't just have me playing in the background while you do something else. You do need to concentrate if this is part of your revision, of course. And also having notes means you've got something to look back on and something to remember what you have watched by. The next best step, of course, is once you've watched this video, I'm encouraging you to go and attempt a past paper question. That's the really important next step, because English language, you can listen to these sorts of videos, but practice is the best way of improving. So with that all in mind then, let's move on and actually have a look at what's coming up, and it is, what does paper 2 look like? Well, physically on the outside, you'll find paper 2 looks very much like that each year. And on the inside, this is the one firstly where you have two sources. So I always remember it as paper 1 has one source and paper 2 has two sources. Those are two pieces of non-fiction. So that could be some travel writing. It could be somebody, like a diary entry maybe, or a speech. And often newspaper articles we see come up as well. Spend the first 15 minutes of the hour and 45 reading those two sources and highlighting anything which leaps out at you. So then when you go to answer the questions, you can look at your highlighted pieces rather than having to reread the whole extract every time you answer a question. So be smart with your time. And then section A is this yellow box here. Those are the 4 questions that you find in section A. They all add up to 40 marks. And then section B is also 40 marks, and that's your writing. In this case, you're writing a response to a statement. And add those two together and you'll get yourself a mark out of 80. In this video, I'm going to be looking closely at comparing the viewpoints, which is question 4. And that's the most, or the second most, I should say, valuable question on this paper, 16. And it's actually the most valuable in whole of section A. So let's look more closely then. This is what a question 4 will look like. I've put this one together, mirroring the style of the AQA questions. For this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A and the whole of source B. So it is definitely a challenging question. You are having to balance in your head 2 whole articles there and try and remember the key points when you're doing this. It's why they put it as the second to last question in the paper, because it has got that level of demand. It then says compare how the writers, and then this is where it will change each year, so it's a comparison question. In this case, it's compare how the writers present their ideas and feelings about their experiences of drama. So this is a question I've made up using 2 sources, which you'll see shortly. And then you get these bullet points where they suggest how you could follow it. Personally speaking, I've never found the bullet points particularly useful because they basically state the obvious. It basically, in some ways, breaks down the question, although the middle bullet point is a useful reminder. We'll cover this in a minute, but remembering to compare the methods that the writers use. Many students will write about what the writers think or feel, but forget to say how do they demonstrate those thoughts or feelings. So let's move on then, and before I do, just a quick reminder, 16 marks, rounding up, you're looking closer, if you can, to 15 or 20 minutes, ideally. So definitely 15, but maybe moving towards 20, if you get your timings right on the other questions. That is another important top tip I'll give right now. Too many students spend too long on the earlier questions, and then they run out of time on this one. So on question 2, which is only worth 8 marks, compared to this one, which is worth double the marks, spend no more than 10 minutes. If you spend 13 minutes on it, that's 3 minutes less you've got on this question, which is worth more marks. So always try and remember that. Spend the right amount of time on the right questions. This is a graphic I've used across different videos whenever a comparison needs to be made, and if you're one of my classes, you will remember this hopefully from in class. I talk about comparing by starting anything you write with the word both. So that's my top tip number 1 here for a comparison question. Start with the word both. Whatever you then write afterwards is instantly a comparison, and you will already have gained some sort of marks. The quality of what you write, of course, will lead to how many marks you end up with, but that's my first top tip. Right, you're going to need to get ready to pause then on this next one. 2 extracts are going to appear on the screen right now. And I've put a question there in the yellow box. Compare how the writers present their ideas and feelings about, in this case, their experiences of drama. I'm about to reveal to you a smaller version of 2 sources, so you won't have time to read the whole source for this video, but pause this upcoming slide in a minute and read source A and source B when they appear, and then be ready afterwards. I am going to then reveal Here they are. I'm going to reveal what I would highlight leaps out to me. So remember, one more time, the steer of the question, the focus of that question, which I've highlighted in red for you, is their experiences of drama. So almost in some ways decide were they positive experiences or negative, and what's different about these two sources. Okay, I'm going to go quiet for a few seconds now. In that few seconds, pause the video and read those two to yourself and be ready to press play as soon as you're done. Okay, so let's have a look at these again then. So on the left-hand side, we've got someone who definitely is not enjoying their experiences of drama. Somebody who's actually taking on acting and trying to be in a production which is Romeo and Juliet, which is why there's a reference to Juliet. And on the right-hand side, that's Charles Dickens. In the two sources, one of them will always be much older. It will be pre-20th century, which means it will be before the 1900s, and then you'll always get a more contemporary one, which is anything after 1900. So the one on the left is after 1900. The one on the right is that much older, and you might have detected that from some of the language used there as well. Don't be afraid when you don't understand everything that's written in these sources. That almost certainly will happen. There'll be at least a word or two you don't get. Read around those words, remove them from the sentence in your head and see what word you'd put in their place, and you probably will come close to what the word actually means. So with me, these are the things which leapt out of me. If I was looking at their experiences of drama, on the left-hand side, I've picked out things which show that they found it quite difficult, like the word harder on that first line, and the word hard is also in red there as well. And also I've picked out things where actually they found it difficult, acting opposite this lady with a very large nose. The ellipsis is mine because then I put a bit towards the end because there's a turn, and actually it's almost like they have this realization and they almost find that the drama starts working for them. And on the right hand side, it's just purely real enjoyment for him as well. So the ellipsis in the middle of that one for Charles Dickens again is where I have taken a bit of the source out. You'll find the full versions of these sources, by the way. I'll put a link in the description in the comments section of this video so you can find them in full and have a go. So those are the bits that leapt out of me. But again, the question that you might ask is, when I'm answering then, which structure do I follow? This is a key question students always ask me, is how do I structure my answer? And there is a way I'm going to suggest here. As always, if your English teacher has taught you something that you've been practicing for a long time, use that. If you're in any doubt, or if you're one of my classes, use this, because this is how I teach. Avoid this. 4 paragraphs there, one about source A, one about source A, one about source B, one about source B. Why avoid that? Simply, there's no comparison going on there. If you literally just write about each text separately, you are not comparing. It may feel like you are because you're writing about both of them, but unless you're writing about both of them together, there's no comparison. Instead, what you want to aim for is something a little bit more like this. So in your first paragraph, you can write about A and B and write about the viewpoints in A and B. Write about the tones of A and B in paragraph 2 and the endings in paragraph 3. It may well be in the time that you have that you don't get to write 3 paragraphs. Ideally, you want to leave yourself enough time that you're going to be able to try and produce 2. It will be a challenge and it will take practice. You certainly won't be able to do this first time round. But for me, those are things on the right-hand side of that blue box that you can absolutely guarantee will always be in a source. You won't always be able to compare how they both use similes because you can't be promised that there will be similes on the source that you get given one day. But I can guarantee you that both writers will have a viewpoint about something. Compare that viewpoint. Both of them, there'll be a certain tone of the piece. Tone means things like, is it positive, negative, humorous, serious, sinister? What sort of mood almost is a word you could replace tone with, and that could be a second paragraph. Or, if you don't have time, you could just go straight to the third one. Compare the endings of the piece. What sort of ending is there? Is it a positive ending, for example? Is it a cliffhanger ending? What is it at the end? And compare how both writers have ended their sources. Following that structure gives you something concrete to aim for, that you know that when it comes to your question 4, that you will be able to pick out the viewpoints. This, of course, will still take some practice. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and actually demonstrate this for you of how I would put this into practice. So, go with this. It will look complicated, but actually it's relatively simple. It's still got some steps going on here. So I will do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 method that you can see there. And the blue box is first. So start by linking the sources. And in a moment on my next slide, I'll put an example answer up for those 2 sources we looked at. Link the 2 sources by starting with the word both. Why? Because you're getting marks for comparison. Then focus on source A. Pick out the viewpoint. What does the writer feel? Name me a method that they use to show this. If in doubt, imagery, but I have put together videos which have got language and structure methods on this playlist, so if you're in any doubt, watch one of those. Make sure you give some evidence which proves, so if you said the writer uses imagery, give me a quote with that imagery inside of it. And finally, move on to talk about the effect of this piece, of that method that you've chosen. This is all still the same paragraph. Then I move on to that blue box, link them again. You could then say source B also looks at their experiences of drama, but it's different because for whatever reason. And then you repeat that same structure again. And then finally, at the very end of your paragraph, if you can, try and link them again, almost like a conclusion type sentence, which just draws those two sources together one more time. By having those three blue boxes there, if you do those as sentences, your answer is really strong because you keep comparing. Somebody who only compares once at the beginning of a paragraph will be given some credit, but they won't have as much because they're only making a brief comparison, unlike this answer, which is comparing all the way through. Now on my next slide then, I'm going to try and put this into some sort of practice, and I've done some colour coding to try and keep it simple. So again, this is referring to the two sources you saw earlier in this video. The one about the guy who's struggling with the acting but then sees the light, and then you've got Charles Dickens who's watching a performance when he was a boy. And that's what it looks like, and here's my colour coding as well. So the one colour coding thing which is missing there, which is now going to appear, is the red, is where I'm making my links. So look, there's red at the top, there's red in the middle briefly, and there's red at the bottom where I bring them together. And then basically I go through the green, blue, purple, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm not going to read that entire answer to you. What I would like you to do is pause this slide and actually have a look yourself. But it is all one paragraph. Notice how the purple bits are ever so slightly longer than the other bits. That's because that's where I'm doing my analysis. Analysis is something you've done for other questions in English language. It's exactly the same idea, exploring what effect it has. If you're in any doubt about effects, I went into it in quite a bit of detail in my language paper 1 question 2, the structure video. So have a look at that one because I go into how to look at effects. So I'm going to summarise now and bring this all together. So that's there for you to have a look at. Remember that those two sources, you'll find a link in the comments section where you can actually have a proper look at the sources and even have a go at yourself doing the question. Summarising, well, number 1 bullet point, keep your answer focused on their viewpoints. Too many students will drift, and ultimately, if you take this down to the simple terms, this is a question asking you, what did the writers think about something? So try and keep it really simple about what did they think about or feel about it. Number 2 bullet point is what I've tried to say there. Try and keep comparing as you go rather than just try and do a single sentence comparison and that's it. If you can, try and do it as you go. 3 bullet point there, don't panic. It's sort of a challenging question, I get that, but don't be overwhelmed. Be calm and practice. The best line of attack for you for this question is to attack it by being prepared and having done a few. And as I've put there at the bottom, leave yourself time. Too many students will run out of time because their timings are all over the place. Make sure you have timings for each of the questions and stick to them. If you stick to them, you'll answer all of the questions, rather than if you don't stick to them, you'll only half answer some of the later questions. And that's all I'm going to say, other than on the right hand side there, that is the mark scheme for this question, and the strategies I've given you there are 4 things in that mark scheme. There's 3 bullet points and the blue bit at the top. Those are the number 1, 2, 3, 4 that I gave you. So above all, I'm going to draw a conclusion here and say thanks very much for watching. Of course, it'd be great if you subscribe if you like what you see. Obviously, you can recommend it to friends or whatever else, but do check out the other videos as well. And above all, practice, practice, practice when it comes to English language. The best thing you can do is have a go at practice past paper questions, and that's how you'll get better. So for now, this is Mr. Johnson signing out, saying thanks very much for watching, everybody, and I wish you the very best of luck when it comes to your assessments. Goodbye.